Today, we've got Katie West joining us, and believe me, her story is one that you need to hear. It will also be a very tough one to hear as Katie's journey takes us from the struggles of being a teen in an abusive relationship to finding the strength to leave and build a beautiful life that she once could only dream of. It's about the dark corners of control and manipulation, the light of healing and forgiveness, and the incredible power of mentorship and community support. Katie's tale isn't just her own. It's a beacon of hope for anyone feeling trapped, showing that it is absolutely possible to break free and thrive. So let's get into it and discover how Katie transformed her life, proving that with courage, support, and a bit of rebellion, a new beginning is always within reach.
If you or someone you know is struggling with abuse or domestic violence, resources are available. Please reach out to someone, anyone. And for immediate support and services, including emergency shelter, counseling, and legal aid, please visit the dedicated support page of quigleyhouse.org. Their mission is to educate, equip, and empower survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault while providing awareness through the community. They are based out of Florida.
Katie, thank you so much for being here with us today. I am aching to get into your story, even though I know I'm probably going to cry throughout the whole thing. I'm just forewarning everyone. But if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and introduce us a little bit about you so that way we can go ahead and get started.
My name's Katie West. I'm Christian. I'm married. I've been with my husband for 15 years. We have 2 kids. Recently relocated across the country from Wyoming to Florida. So that was a big change, but we love it. So got 2 crazy dogs. That's about it.
And her going to Florida this year, when I first talked to her, I was just like, well, I mean, it's been kind of a nice winter. Not a big thing missing out on. Yeah.
And it was high 80s yesterday. So that's pretty nice.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It is supposed to be like 68 here to get today. Can you believe that?
That's what it's supposed to be here today with the rain.
That's incredible. That's amazing. Well, Katie, we will definitely dive into it. And I know that honestly, it is a matter of starting from the beginning. Something that people might not know, Katie and I actually went to high school together and we were in the same grade. And I remember seeing her around the school, but we never like connected. And so hearing her story for me was really impactful just because it's like, man, I just never knew. And I feel like this is going to be something that really resonates for other people who have been in this situation. Is like there's going to be a lot of people that just never knew until everything blows up, right? And so tell us a little bit about the beginning, the early years, Katie.
So like my childhood?
Sure.
Okay. So grew up originally from Wheatland, very small town, like 3,000 people. My dad was a cop and my mom was a 911 dispatcher. And then on their days off from those jobs, mom would be a vet tech at the one vet clinic in town, and dad would work for a rancher. So I had the law enforcement and the ranching and both backgrounds.
Yeah.
I moved to Gillette when I was 11. Yeah, 11. So started going to school there. My sophomore year, and in my sophomore year, we moved to Claremont, which is even smaller, like it's 25 people. And then in my junior year, we moved to Casey, which is bigger. It's 250 people. And then I turned 18 the end of my junior year. A few weeks after that, like when school got out, I moved to Gillette. And originally I was going to stay with my brother. And in my mind, that was, I'm going to be kind of an adult. You know, I'm not going to have super strict things. Like, you know, I'm going to be kind of on my own. My brother took it as he's going to be my parent while I'm there. And then older brothers, right before I made that move, I started dating a guy. He lived in Gillette, and I'm not going to say his name. I'm going to say that out there. I'm not saying his name. Me and you talked about this, but I started dating this guy. Seemed really great. He was older. He was already out of school, and he was, I thought, respectful and looked out for me. That was not the case, as people will hear. So I stayed with my brother for a few weeks, and then he was at work one day, and I just grabbed my stuff, and I moved in with my boyfriend.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. How did brother feel about that?
They were not impressed. My 2 brothers, one is a cop, one is a paramedic. At the time, he was not a paramedic. He was working at the mines, but neither one of them were impressed because they instantly knew he's bad news. Get away from him. You don't need this. You're going down a bad road.
Sure.
You know, teenage dumb, you know it all. You're not going to listen.
Absolutely. So many of us do.
You know, they try to get me to come back and I'm like, hey guys, I'm 18. You cannot legally make me come back. So good luck. That's where the redheaded stubbornness came out.
So you're telling me that's real?
That is very real. It is a real thing. It's not a myth.
I dyed my hair red. You can't see it in here, but I dyed it red just for that reason.
Well, I'm pretty sure you have that honestly without the red. So
I do. I do.
as things started to progress, things started changing in the relationship. One of the things that now looking back, I know is a red flag, but they're so good at portraying it as they care and they have our best interests at heart.
Mm-hmm.
He started to isolate me from people that he knew I would take seriously if they were to tell me, hey, you need to leave this guy. And one of them was my best friend. And I'd been hanging out with him. My best friend was a guy. I'll preface that. And I'd been hanging out with him. He dropped me off to where my boyfriend was. And after he dropped me off and I went inside, my boyfriend said, I don't want you riding in the same car with him anymore. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Like we rode together since we both started driving.
Mm-hmm.
We're buds. We were pretty much joined at the hip. And I asked why. And he said, well, I don't think he's a safe driver. And I don't want something to happen to you while you're in the car with him. So I was like, okay, he's like concerned about my safety. That wasn't the case, because then it progressed to, I don't want you talking to him. He's trying to come between us, on and on and on. And I got to the point that one day I was on the phone with this friend and I'm all of a sudden he's shouting threats to my friend through the phone. And then I'm pinned against the wall and he has a knife on my throat telling me what to say to my best friend if I want to survive. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was going to be the last time I got to talk to him.
Mm.
That was really hard pill to swallow. And it took me a really long time to forgive myself for that, because this friend was somebody that, like, he's the epitome of a great friend and what a friend should be.
Yeah.
And I was not that for him. So now my son's middle name is after him because he's a good role model. But it just started progressing. And the more it progressed, the less I was able to be around who I wanted to be. My dog's just scared the crap out of him. Skylar. There were very few people that I was allowed to be around that I was around before him. And that was just because they weren't going to say anything. Like, they were there for me, but they weren't actively trying to pull me out. It got to the point that he would take me to work. When he dropped me off, he would keep my phone. So I didn't have my phone. We had one phone and that was mine, and he would take it with him. And it was like, well, in case I get called for an interview. Okay, whatever. Well, I need to be good.
He did not have his own phone.
No, he did not have his own phone. 90% of the time, he didn't have a job. If he had a job, it was for a week or two. So my senior year, I went to school and I worked 3 jobs. He got my money. Half the time, the money went to alcohol before bills. So we were constantly like place to place to place, like not a stable environment at all. It was really hard to try to go to school, go to work, and go home, but not have a home. So that was constant turmoil. I couldn't talk to my family without him sitting right there. So I couldn't really open up to my family. And it got very controlling. Like, my mom came to town one time and she took me to get a haircut and I chopped my hair. I mean, Dre, I don't know if you remember in high school, like, I'd go from having super long hair to like super short hair.
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah.
So I still do that. Every 2 years I chop it.
Yeah.
And he got mad. I came home with the hair and he was livid about it.
Mm.
So it's something as simple as hair that regrows, that, you know, it's part of a woman's identity, is being able to do what you want with your hair, change it up, whatever.
Yeah. How else did he isolate you from other people?
One way is where we lived. For a while, we lived like 15 miles out of town with very spotty cell service. There were days that I wasn't allowed to go to work. I was stuck at home. So then I would
Just because he said no? Just because he said no?
Yeah. It was always like his friends. If I was with my friends, he was there. So even though I felt like I was around people, I was very isolated. And he always made it sound like he knew so many people that were always watching, and I wouldn't know, and they would report back to him. And then we talked about his control tactic on, you know, if I were to leave, the threat. Abusers definitely figure out your soft spots, like what you're passionate about, what you draw a hard line, like what you're going to protect. And for me, that was my family. I didn't want my family or people I cared about to pay a price for a dumb decision that I made, which is what that was. It was a very dumb decision.
Yeah.
And he would go into great detail about if I were to ever leave, he would do X, Y, and Z to one of my brothers or to my dad or to my mom. So then I was scared for them if I were to leave. I knew I wanted to leave. I knew I wanted to get out, but I was waiting for the right time, like the right set of circumstances so I could get out, so I could leave. And looking back, like I said before, looking back, there is so many different ways that I could have got out. But in the midst of the turmoil and the constant like survival mode, you couldn't see it at all. When you have a problem in your life, like you and another person or something, you go to somebody else and say, hey, I need your input on this from an outsider's perspective. When you're in this turmoil and this constant survival mode, you can't get that outsider perspective. And you can't think of who to go to give you that outside perspective because you're not thinking straight. You're constantly thinking about, how am I going to be able to keep my job? How am I going to be able to pay rent? How am I going to be able to get gas in my car? So all these like immediate issues that need handled. And then you have this huge issue that you're trying to solve when you feel completely alone.
Right, right.
That was a big struggle. Like I knew I wanted to leave for a few months before I actually did.
And to Katie, I know that you had mentioned that, you know, whenever you had that really unfortunate like phone call with your best friend, and you had mentioned that it was unbeknownst to you the last time you ever talked to him. What all happened there?
So after that phone call, that's when the control and the abuse really escalated. And there were a lot of times in the next few months after that I really wanted to call him and just talk to him and say, I'm sorry, but I couldn't. And then the middle of February, it was 2009, I had a friend from school call and say, hey, I heard that he was in an accident. And I'm not saying my friend's name, even though he was such a great person, just out of respect to his family. I heard that he was in an accident and he didn't make it. And I was like, what? No idea. And so I called another friend that we had mutually that would know. And so I called him and he goes, Katie, it's true. Like he was in an accident. He didn't survive. And these two always played pranks. Like we always were playing pranks on each other. And I told him, I said, this isn't a funny prank. Like I want an actual answer. And like, I wouldn't believe it for a while. And then finally he said, he like got my attention and totally sat me out of it and goes, Katie, he's gone. So he was in a rollover and he was ejected and he was killed. That was really hard because then, you know, I have all this other turmoil in my life. I just lost my best friend that, you know, I have a lot of guilt over. I won't be able to actually tell him I'm sorry when I'm out of it. And I don't feel like I can grieve because there's so much control. And it's I'm grieving for a guy that's not my boyfriend. I remember my parents came down from Montana. They were living in Montana when all this happened. My parents came down from Montana for his funeral. And my boyfriend kept telling me, oh, I'll go with you. I'm going to support you. The night before his funeral, he got super drunk. And honestly, I thought that was a night that I was going to be done. Like that was it. That my parents would show up and it would not be good, that they would be in the same position as my friend's family. And he was so mad when he got drunk that he started beating on me and telling me that I shouldn't be grieving for another man because it's not him. That he shouldn't even allow me to go to the funeral, but because my parents are coming, he can't do that. And I remember being cowered in the corner of our kitchen by the cabinets and just thinking, this is it. And like I had angels that night because I remember seeing his hand come up, like he was swinging at me, like, this is it. I'm either going to wake up tomorrow morning and be super sore or I'm not going to wake up again. And it was like a force field. Like he missed and then he passed out. So I had angels watching over me that night for sure. And I remember being super worried, getting ready for the funeral before my parents got there to get me, that they were going to see bruises. So I was super paranoid about making sure makeup was done to hide bruises because you're ashamed of it. You don't want people to know that somebody you love or that's supposed to love you is doing this to you.
Right.
Went to the funeral and that was like the nail in the coffin. Like I need out, but I don't know how to get out yet. Finished school and just kind of like trying to get through, you know, kind of on autopilot at this point. Didn't really care if I showered every day. Didn't really care what I ate or anything. There was a point that all of our money was gone and we needed food. We had Ritz crackers, some seasoning, and shredded cheese. So we would literally put cheese on crackers, put some seasoning on it, and bake it for a few minutes and make like chips. for a week. That was what we ate. So I started working at the nursing home, Pioneer Manor, and I loved it. I love talking to the elderly people. There's so much you can learn from them, and they're freaking funny.
Love me some old people.
Me too. And that, I felt so safe in that environment, like just being around them, even though I had all this chaos in my life. I loved being there. The day that everything exploded and everybody put all the puzzle pieces together was a horrible day to start with. I was at work and we had just finished a meal. And so like there's the main dining room and then like 4 hallways off each side. I looked down one of them and it's supposed to be, that wing is supposed to be the one that they're the most independent. They don't need as much help. And I looked up and I saw one of my favorite residents fall, and he had had a massive heart attack and he was gone before he hit the ground. So that was another loss, but it was hard to watch knowing.
Yeah.
And then on the way home, I was driving one of my parents' vehicles because my truck had broke down. On the way home, big old Dodge, a Yorkie puppy ran out in front of me, and the little boy that owned it was standing there. I couldn't stop in time. I ran the puppy over. I was devastated. Kid was devastated. Like, so many tears. And then I get home, I find out that he had lost another job because he couldn't get out of bed. So then the fight started, like arguing. And at this time, we were living behind Walmart. We had a roommate. It was his friend. We were going to all just hang out that night. One of my coworkers was over, and then there was the roommate, and there was him. And we went, anytime the argument started getting escalated, my coworker would be, hey, we're going to go walk through Walmart and calm down a little bit. Her name's Joey. She's instrumental in this story here. I think we went to Walmart 4 times just to walk around that night. When everything exploded, he had come to me. He goes, hey, I really want to get this figured out tonight. Can we go in our room and talk? And I said, okay. And so we were talking, and it started getting heated again. And I felt like it was going to escalate and get out of control. And we had people in our apartment, so we couldn't, like, I didn't want it to hit that point. So I got up, I left our room. I was walking out to the front door, and he followed me. And he said, it's not my fault that you're in love with a dead person. And that was my breaking point. At that point, I didn't care what the outcome was. I didn't care if I was going out to stretcher. I didn't care if I would survive the night. I was done. And so I opened the door and held the door open for him because I'm polite like that. And
thank you for bringing a little giggle to my tears that are forming.
I gotta have humor in this. So I held the door open and I said, get your shit and get the fuck out of my house. And then he lost it and crossed the apartment so fast and grabbed me by my throat and lifted me off the ground and slammed me into the door hard enough that it slammed the door shut, and then it dented the metal door with the back of my head, and I fought back. So I started swinging. Like I said, I didn't care what the outcome was going to be. I just knew I was done.
Right.
And so when I started fighting back, he started screaming about, he was going to teach me a lesson that, I take my punishment, and I don't remember exactly what he was going to say, but what all he said and what all he screamed at me. But his roommate saw what was going on, or our roommate, his friend, saw what was going on. He tried to pull him off me. And I know we went through this, but so people can understand. At this point, I was maybe 100 pounds, 5'4", so don't have a lot of height on me. His roommate was 5'9", maybe, and maybe 140 on a good day. And my ex was 6'3" and about 200 pounds. So there's considerable size difference between all of us. The roommate tried to pull him off me. My ex found a knife somewhere and pulled it on his friend. Didn't stab him, but threatened him with it. And then once his friend backed off a little bit, he came back after me. And so it became like this. It was almost like reverse keep away.
Right. Like a bullfighter.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing right now.
Bull in a china shop. And he kept coming after me, and I kept going over, like getting tossed over furniture or into a wall or who knows what all, across the dining room table. At one point, my coworker was in the bathroom when all of this exploded, and she came out. And when she came out, I was picking myself up off the floor, and I had like a white hoodie on, so I wiped my nose and she saw blood. So that point, like, she really should go into football because she's making an incredible linebacker after this night. She is about the same height as me. She's, doesn't have much for size. And she ran through these 2 guys that were fighting. Like, one's trying to stop the chaos and one's trying to increase it.
Yeah.
Ran through these 2, bent over, picked me up and threw me over her shoulder and took me into a bedroom and barricaded me in the bedroom. So I can still hear him screaming. I can still hear him threatening me, all of this. She knew I had a brother that was a cop. And so she got my phone She says, what is Trevor's number? I told her, and she calls him. And she says, you need to get here now. He just laid hands on her. And I was so isolated, my brother did not know where I lived. And we used to be super close. We'd talk for hours. Like, we'd go on road trips to Wheatland to see family, and we'd talk the whole time.
Yeah.
We'd go hang out at Walmart. My birthday one year, he almost got me kicked out of Kmart because we were goofing around so much. And he had isolated me so much that this brother I was so close to didn't know where I lived. And we lived in the same town. So he says, Joey, I don't know where she is. I need an address. So she tells him the address, and he says, I'm already on my way there. We just got called for a domestic. And she says, Trevor, that's your baby sister. And I did not know that anybody had heard or anybody had called 911 as far as neighbors. So cops get there. They're wanting to ask me questions. I want to be by my brother because that's a safe space. That's like, I can be close to him and not get in trouble. Right. There were nights that, I went and hung out with him on his birthday, and I got the crap beat out of me because I was hanging out with other guys, even though it was my flesh and blood. Like, didn't matter. It was a guy. I just want to be with my brother. Finally, cops are like, okay, you can be with your brother, but you have to answer our questions. Didn't realize that they had to send backup to keep my brother out of my apartment so that my ex and my brother did not tear each other apart.
Right.
So it was very heightened emotions for lots of people involved here. And side note here, not everybody is going to have the same outcome at this point as I did. It's very fortunate and would not trade the outcome, even though there was a lot of sucky times. So finally answered everybody's questions that they needed. They decided, okay, she needs to go to the ambulance. She needs to get checked out. So walking up the stairs, the one down level, one up level, there's a landing. At the top of the landing, neighbors gather because they're nosy. There's a guy.
Yeah.
What's that?
They want to know what's happening.
So there's a guy standing at the top of the stairs by the door, and he reaches out and just kind of touches my arm. And I'd recognize him because I'd seen him, like, he was a year ahead of us in school, and I'd seen him, but like me and you, didn't really know him. He was always nice. He reached out, touched my arm, and says, I'm really glad to see that you're okay. And I was like, well, that's nice. Okay, I'm going to go make sure I'm not super broke. So ended up, I did go to the hospital. I had a friend drive me to the hospital. Wasn't a big fan of ambulances. And I didn't tell you this on our first meeting, but I found out later from his mom that this neighbor that was so nice at the top of the stairs actually went and sat in the hospital waiting room because he didn't know if I had family. He didn't know anything about me, but he wanted to make sure that there was somebody there for me.
That's precious.
So he has a good heart. Get all checked out. The next day, my ex is in jail. I'm kind of like reevaluating, like, hey, I can do what I want. I don't have to ask permission. I don't have to, be like, oh, hey, I want to do this, but I know it's not allowed. I don't have to be in this constant survival mode.
Right. Like,
so I went to a friend's house and just hung out and watched TV.
Yeah. Newfound freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
And the stubbornness was really heightened at this point. I get a call, and it's from my upstairs neighbor, who turns out is the guy at the top of the stairs. His name's Josh. And he calls and he says, hey, I know you're going through a lot. I can't begin to understand, but me and my friend are going to a movie, and you're welcome to come with us if you want to and get your mind off things. And me having this newfound freedom and this new stubbornness and all this independence now, I'm like, I'll go, but I will not ride with you. You can meet me there, or you can be in my vehicle and I will drive up. So they chose to ride with me. So we went to a movie. I think it was like the second National Treasure. That's what we went and watched.
Okay. Yeah.
And so then after the movie, we went to the Flying J coffee shop that they had. And I have to say, I was really disappointed when they tore it down and they did not bring that back.
I know, right? I agree. This is simple growing up.
Yeah, it was. So we're sitting there and we're talking, and it was a really rainy summer, so we were all really cold. So like they're having coffee. I don't remember if I had coffee or hot chocolate, but it was something warm.
Yeah.
And I finally asked him, like, so what all did you guys hear? Because they both lived in the apartment above me.
Okay.
And he said, it sounded like a bunch of slamming doors. Like, well, there weren't doors slamming. It was me getting tossed around. So I've always been honest about it, like that night, because everybody heard it. And then I find out that the person that called 911 was the lady across the hall from me, who ended up being the mom to my upstairs neighbor.
Okay.
So, and her name's Robin. She will always hold a special place in my heart because she gave me the opportunity I was waiting for. She opened that door and gave me a way out without realizing it. She just heard the threats. She heard the crazy going on, and she knew somebody needed help, and she wasn't afraid to make that call. And that's super important for people to do. It's a sucky call to make sometimes, but it's important. Mm-hmm. So as far as after, Josh was really great. He made sure that if I had a court date, whether it was his arraignment or it was for the protection order or the no contact order, that there was somebody there with me in the courtroom, that I wasn't by myself, and it was somebody that he trusted. He kept me out. He kept me doing things. Like, we went to the carnival. I'd been on a motorcycle 3 times in my entire life. And 2 weeks after meeting him, we went to Thermopolis on motorcycles.
Oh, wow.
So let's sit on it for a few hours after only being on it like a block at a time, 3 times in your life.
Right.
But he kept me out and doing new things. And it would have been so easy to curl up in a ball under a blanket in a hole and hide, because you have all these traumas that you went through that you didn't have time to process when they happened. And after you're out of it, they hit like waves. They just keep coming. Dealing with the loss of my best friend, dealing with how I treated him, how I was a shitty friend, to be honest, I was, and doing things you never thought you'd had to do. We talked about I had to have emergency surgery and I had painkillers, but I needed gas and I needed to work because I needed to pay bills. And there was no money, so I sold my painkillers so I could get gas in my car and go to work. Never thought I'd do that, being a cop's daughter and a dispatcher's daughter. But you don't know what you do or what you're willing to do until you don't have a choice. And looking back, there were lots of choices I could make, but not having that outsider perspective, I couldn't see them.
I don't know if you want to or even care to talk about this, but what was happening to him this whole time while you were going through this process in particular? So
growing up, I always had faith, like, the justice system's going to do right. You know, they'll get what they deserve and they'll have consequences. And I remember feeling very let down. Went to court and he had Judge Tharp, and they sentenced him to 5 days in jail. 2 of it time served because he went in on a weekend, and a year of unsupervised probation.
Wow.
Yep. And he wasn't supposed to be around alcohol, but you're on unsupervised probation.
Yeah, who's going to know?
Exactly. So had the no contact order, had the protection order. So the no contact order states he can't contact me directly. By phone, by physical contact, he can't call me. He can't call his mom and say, hey, mom, I need you to tell her this. And then she tells me, can't do any of it. He can't contact my friends to contact me. And then the protection order is a lot like a restraining order, except like a restraining order, you know, if they violate it, you call the cops, they escort him off the premises, and then you go to court, and then maybe he gets arrested. A protection order, and this is really important to know for anybody facing this or going through this, a protection order, if they violate it and you call the cops, they're arrested. They don't get escorted off the premises. They don't have to wait until a court date. They go to jail and then they wait for court. So at this time there was that anonymous app thing going on, and he would contact me on it. Even though it was anonymous, you knew because of what he would say. He threatened me through it. He moved to Rapid. So for a long time, I was not okay with going to Rapid. I was on very high alert anytime we went there.
Yeah.
Super high anxiety. So, and now I don't know where he's at. I know he has kids, and it makes me sad. The kids shouldn't be raised in that. And it makes me worry for his wife or girlfriend or whatever she is. But he just kept threatening me or trying to. And, you know, I talked to the cops about it, and some of them, they're like, well, we can't prove that it's him because it's all anonymous. Yeah, but deductive reasoning.
Yeah. And throughout these threats, you know, that you were getting from him, I mean, how did you handle those when, you know, the legal system or justice system wasn't doing anything?
Well, being in Wyoming, there were lots of guns. So I wasn't going to like go out and hunt him down, but sure. I made sure I knew where there was something I could protect myself with. I didn't go places alone. And I think that frustrated some people. But it was a sense of protection. He may be stupid, but at the same time, if I'm at Walmart and I have somebody with me, he's not going to try anything.
Right.
So, but it was hard. the healing process was really hard.
And the threats that, because I can only imagine anybody in these situations, the threats, they don't stop because these people are losing, right? Mm-hmm. They're losing because you left. And that's where my opinion, what I know about psychology, they're trying to regain that control by continuing to threaten you. Yep. I mean, what was your takeaway from that of him, ever following through on those threats?
And I think he would. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I know while you're in it, it's very easy to believe that because you are living with him. You see the violence that he's capable of. But once you're out and you get these, they're words.
Yeah.
There was nothing like stuff left on my door, anything like that. That, and once I was out and once people started hearing what was going on, it changed your perspective a lot. I remember the first thing that my brother said to me is, well, you better be grateful that Dad's not the first one here because there would be a body bag involved and it would not be yours.
Yeah.
And seeing, for example, my neighbors didn't know me from Adam, but there was a sense of protectiveness instantly over me. The landlord, I said, absolutely, get him out. I don't care. I don't want him anywhere on this property. Even people that said that they were really good friends with him and they were like brothers and all this stuff, they reached out to me and said, that's not right. I don't want nothing to do with him anymore. So he lost all these people that he thought he was friends with. But when they saw his true colors, these people are like, no, I don't want him.
Right.
Some of his friends, he had friends in Rapid that he stayed friends with. And I don't know if he ever told them the truth or not, but they were the friends that if we went there to see them or something, they were the type of friends that if I messed up or something, they would give him pointers on how to correct my behavior, if you understand what I'm saying.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that's why he went to Rapid, is because that's who he associated with.
And so from here, though, I mean, he's gone. You might still have the words coming at you, but there is the fight is not over.
No.
Your fight was not over by any means. And so what was that whole process of healing and dealing with, the triggers and everything moving forward from there?
I had a lot of nightmares, a lot of nightmares. And I remember I would go 2 days without sleeping because I was so scared to have a nightmare because they were so realistic. I was at Josh's watching a movie and I fell asleep and he was scared to move because he knew how exhausted I was. And so I slept there all night.
Yeah.
But then he would wake me up from nightmares. And there were some times that I would end up punching him because they're so realistic. Mm-hmm. So, Josh was my neighbor and then he became my boyfriend and now I'm married to him. So
that's what you were saying, that your outcome is not as common as most people.
Yeah. And that was not the intention of either one of us. It's, you find what you're looking for when you're not looking for it.
Yeah.
So he saw a lot of healing and he put up with a lot. We'd be fine, joking around, having a good time. And then something would be said or somebody would do something and I would go into instant panic. What the hell? I need to get out of here. What's going on? We talked about planning a barbecue, something as simple as having people over for dinner or something fun. The first time we planned one, I was really timid and I was like, hey, is it okay if I invite my friend Andrew? Is it okay if I invite my brother? And him not thinking, it wasn't intentional at all. He just goes, well, no, why would that be okay?
Right.
And my fear went through the roof. And then he looked at me and he saw it, my expression, and he kind of laughed. He's like, I don't know. You can absolutely invite whoever you want. So that became a joke. He would jokingly tell me no. And laughing with it kind of helped. Some things I just had to keep trying until I could get through it. Right before we moved down here, I was never able, after him, I wasn't able to do an automatic car wash. Because if I did something that made him mad when we were driving through town, an automatic car wash, you can't see inside when a car is going through there. So he could deal with bad behavior right away in a car wash. So it was really hard for me to go through an automatic car wash for a very long time. And 14 years, it took 14 years. I was able to go through an automatic car wash and it felt so great. But at the same time, I'm 33 years old and I can now go through a car wash. You felt kind of stupid, but at the same time, it's I can do it and not go through a full panic attack. And then The really hard thing for a while was I was so used to constantly fighting, constantly being in turmoil, that I would start looking for a fight over ridiculous stuff that shouldn't even be thought about because it wasn't there anymore. And that was my normal. So once I realized that that's what was going on, I would call a friend and I'd say, hey, this is really weird, but I need you to help me with this. I need you to come pick me up. We're going to go for a drive and we're going to argue. It's not going to be a sincere argue, but we need to argue. And we'd drive for an hour and argue about whether a stop sign was red or not. But it gave me a way to get that out of my system that wasn't sincere, that I knew I wasn't going to get my feelings hurt. They weren't going to get my feelings hurt, but it was out of my system.
Right. But I'm curious, who won the argument? Is a stop sign red?
I think it's red. But the one with the white edges is optional. We'll go with that.
Right. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's so true. And just even being able to realize that and being able to be proactive in that and just like call your friend and say, I apparently need to fight with someone. Can I come fight with you? Because it is something that becomes a habit. It is something that you think is normal, and your body is itching to have these arguments. And I can attest to that too, of, just the habits that come along with the past relationships. And the first time Brady told me, he's like, you don't have to be home when I get there, right? And I said, I don't. like
what?
This is news. Yeah. And so he's like, yeah, just stay at your sister's for as long as you want, and when I came home that day and, it was like weird, but I did it. And then he explained to me, he's like, that a true good relationship is not a slavery. And I was just like, wow. Wow.
A really big one for me was the communication, because my ex wanted me to talk to him about what was going on with me. But if I talked about the wrong thing, then I was in trouble with him. So building good communication with Josh was really hard. And so one day he called me, he's like, hey, this is what I want us to do. If there's something that you want to talk to me about and you're scared about how I'm going to react, I want you to call me when I'm not with you and tell me. And then that way, if it gets heated between us or somebody's getting upset or anything, we can hang out. And it's not because we don't love each other. It's not because we don't want anything to do with each other. We just need a minute to calm down. And that's a way for us to talk about what we need to talk about and give you space so you could say what you need to. It feels safe while doing it.
Wow. So he went to school for, being a counselor, because sounds like he really was able to help you, feel through this. Yeah.
He was. And he pushed me. There was a point that I stalled. I didn't want to go any deeper. I didn't want to do anything else with it because it hurt and I was over it and I was just angry. And finally he's like, okay, if we're going to survive, if we're going to make it, you need to do something. And that's when he pushed me to reach out to Garf. So I did.
And what is Garf for those that do not know?
It's Gillette Abuse Refuge Foundation. So it's an abuse place that will help women or men if needed in that town. Lots of different towns have it. I think there's 2 down here. So they do different groups. They offer counseling, one-on-one counseling. They can help walk you through the legal process. Some of them have safe homes. So they're pretty important. Thankfully, I didn't have to use that because I had enough resources that I wasn't aware of until I needed them. So he pushed me to reach out to Garf. So I did. And I started going to an assertiveness group that it kind of helps you have a backbone.
Okay.
So it's helped a lot. And there's still days that, I'll have a nightmare, but it's not as often as it was. I still haven't found a good car wash for me down here yet because I'm kind of scared to try another one. But it's a constant healing. And I keep, when I was in the thick of it and trying to heal and everything, and when I got mad making a sandwich, we talked about that. Because it had to be a certain way. If you put mustard on it, there couldn't be any white showing. If you put whatever on it, it had to cover the whole piece. And it had to be perfectly OCD type sandwich. And I was making it off lunch, and I did that, and I got mad, and I threw it across the house. And I remember calling my grandma. Love her to death. Miss her. But I remember calling her and telling her about it. And she's like, she was my light bulb. And this is, every time you give in to the emotions like that, or give in to whatever that is tied to him, you are still allowing him to have control. And I was like, okay, light bulb. So now I make the sloppiest sandwiches ever if I want to. But if I make them perfectly, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's a lot of steps to healing, and it takes a while. There's days that I struggle. Even just a few weeks ago, like Josh turned on a song and it was by Hollywood Undead. And I was like, my anxiety went straight through the roof. Like, nope. And it took me hours to calm down, even though like it was 10 seconds of the song, but I knew that music because that was one of his favorite bands.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm so sorry. I couldn't remember if that was one of the songs, but it's still one of those things. And then I still get frustrated with myself. Like, it's been 14 years. Like, come on, we can get through this. But it's hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, ever since, leaving and having these positive influences in your life as it is, like, you've been able to really turn this around to help others who have either been able to now avoid a similar situation, or they're in a similar situation, and you're able to kind of be that guiding light and that light bulb from there too.
So I've had to have hard conversations with friends like, hey, I see these behaviors in who you're dating, and I know you love them and you're in the love bubble and everything's shiny and new.
Love bubble.
Get the hell out of it.
Yeah.
It's not safe. It's not healthy. And so then I sit down, and that's when I really deep dive into, hey, like, this is how it started. And I was in that bubble too. And this is how it turned. So when I start seeing stuff, I'm like, no, I'm not going to sit by and keep my mouth shut for people that I care about. I won't go into too many details, just vague over this one. We met an elderly lady. So this doesn't just happen to young people. And she was in her 70s, and she started opening up to us about why she tries to avoid hope so much, about why she wants to leave her husband, about all this stuff. And there was a lot of abuse. Like, even though they aren't physically fit, there's still ways. Like, he would put his chair where it was like in line with her bedroom door, and then her bed was on the other side of it. Once she fell asleep, he'd shoot her with an airsoft gun. Like, it was crazy stuff like this, and just all this different stuff. And she wanted out. And finally, he had a doctor's appointment out of town. And she messaged us. She had stuff lined up. She had a place to go. Like, she was working on slowly getting stuff kind of like organized. And so one day she called. She's like, he's out of town. I want out. And we did. We got, me and my husband, we got somebody to watch our kids. We went over there. We got there was 6 of us total. And we had her moved out in 2 hours. It's that important to me to help people get out of it.
Yeah.
That we'll make it happen.
That's unreal. Like, I can't, there is so many, I mean, an airsoft gun, like, what? There are so many different ways that abuse can come, different shapes and forms that, even though it's not something you've seen in the movies or whatever the case, and maybe it is something that you've seen in the movies, like, there's more ways of abuse than just what you would realize.
And the movies don't portray it right. Like, they go from, oh, you're a loving, happy couple, and then you get in a fight and they're beating you. That's not how it happens. It happens as slow manipulation and slow control tactics that they portray as they're caring, and they care about your safety, and they don't want you around this person because they don't feel like they're a safe person or a good influence. But
that's exactly the people that you need to keep around, because
exactly. And the reason they do it is because they know those are the people that are the biggest threat to your relationship. Like, now, Josh, like, healthy versus unhealthy. Like, I told you about my best friend and my ex. Now, Josh, like, if I were to meet somebody now and that I introduce him to Josh, he'd be like, hey, don't get a great feeling about them. Just be aware. It's your choice. But I'd be more comfortable if they weren't around our kids.
Yeah.
So that's like, hey, this is my thought, but it's ultimately your choice. So there's the respect, there's the compassion, like, you can still hang out with them, but this is my 2 cents. So it's
and what is the advice that you would give for somebody who is experiencing abuse, and just like you were talking about how, like, when you're in the thick of it, you don't really think straight, you're not thinking clearly, and you're sitting there and you were telling me I could have done this, but you hindsight's 2020. So what's your biggest advice for somebody who might be listening to this? They're like, wow, yeah, I could do that.
Yeah. So if you're at school, sorry, my eye is twitching. I did not get much sleep this weekend. If you're at school, like I was in school when this happened, I could have passed it out to a teacher. I could have went to a guidance counselor, told them what was going on. I could have, like, there's so many options, because he wasn't allowed to be at school with me. He wasn't at school anymore. He was graduated. Like, the note to the teacher, I could have told the teacher on my own because he wasn't there when I was at work. I could have used an office phone. I could have called and told my parents. I could have called the cops. I could have called whoever to help me get out. Could have just told my boss and let her handle it. There's so many different ways that I could have got out that I didn't see because I was just constantly like autopilot, like, go to school, they'll pick me up, they'll take me to work, they'll pick me up.
Yeah.
But it can be as easy as I know. And now, like, if you're an adult and you're 21 and you're at a bar, you could order angel shots. And there's different things about the angel shots. You could order them neat, you could order them on the rocks. And each one of those orders means something different. I'll see if I can find a list and get an email to you, Drea. So there's all sorts of different things. You go to a gas station now, and there are hotlines on the bathroom walls. There didn't used to be those. So there's all sorts of different ways that I could have got out, and I just couldn't see it because of the turmoil. And now, like, sweet old lady opened up to me, and we got her out. I'm okay. People can reach out to me if they want, if they're out and they're healing, and they're in that turmoil of wanting that fight, but not having it or not wanting to hurt the ones they love, get a hold of me. I will gladly fake argue with you.
Fake arguing is the best.
Give me practice to use against my daughter. As far as she's going to be a lawyer.
That's what my mom said about me too. And I was like, nah.
Oh, that girl. Or if you just want somebody who's been there that can relate, because not a lot of people can relate to the situation. They can't understand how low your self-esteem hits, how worthless you feel, how unloved you actually feel, unless they've been there.
Right.
And a lot of them are very ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of it. I survived, I got out, and I didn't look back. And no other woman or man that gets out needs to ever go back.
Yeah. That was
all these threats, all the threats that they have, all of that is trash. It's bull. They aren't going to follow through on. These people that do this to people are cowards. And that's not, they have no idea what love should be. Love should have respect. Love should have understanding and patience. It should not have conditions and consequences. Like, if you talk to your brother, this is where I'm going to hit you. If you don't do this right, this is what I'm going to do to you. That's not love. That is control, and you're a slave, and you need to get out. So,
and you were telling me, I want to bring this up again. You were telling me about a quote in Jeremiah.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'll tell you how I stumbled onto this, because it's my brain's still working. So I just had this like kind of struggle after we moved about like, what's God's purpose for me? Like, you know, everybody talks about their purpose and their given talent. And I'm like, okay, what's mine? Like, everybody says, oh, you're great at this, you're great at that. But what did God destine for me? And then it just like, I went to a women's breakfast and they were talking about following your path and following God's plan for you. And the woman that stood up and was talking, she actually is in a pro-life women's center that I'm getting ready to start volunteering at. And she's talking about how she relates to the girls that she's helping in the center. And that's where her passion, that's where her drive is, and that's where God wants her. And it clicked, like something just clicked. And I was like, okay, so you have prison ministries, right? You have ministries that go overseas. You have all these other ministries, but have you ever heard of a ministry going into a abuse refuge? Okay, these people are the lowest of the low. Like, not like as far as like characteristics, like they need built up. They have no confidence. They have no self-worth. They are struggling, and they need to know that they're loved. They need to know that God loves them. They need to know that other people love them. And so I reached out to one of the women in the ministry of our church. I was like, hey, I want to talk to you. Let's get together this week. And so we sat down and I walked her through this, and I was like, this was my idea. So she's trying to help me get this going about going to abuse shelters here and ministering to these survivors. When I asked her, I said, how do you know what God's purpose is? And she's like, oh, good Lord, it's a Wednesday morning and you're starting deep. So, and she's Irish, makes it all the better. She's Irish.
Right.
And so she goes, there's this quote in Jeremiah, or this verse in Jeremiah. And she pulled it up, and just Reader's Digest version. It says, what the enemy has planned for evil, God will use for good. And that resonates with me so much. Like, out of all the people I've talked to in my healing journey, out of everything, like, that one verse, almost 15 years after this, gave me more healing in that little section than years and years and years. Even though you're in a like god awful situation, it can be used for good. And it sucks to get to that point, and it hurts like hell, physically, emotionally, mentally. It hurts. But you can turn it around and you can use it for so much good to help so many other people and let them know that they're loved and they're not worthless, and that love shouldn't be conditional and the way that it was.
Well, and as beautiful as that is, Katie, I know that there's even more encouraging words and message that you have for anybody who's listening that may be in a similar situation, or even like, slowly on their way into one. And so in order to leave the listeners with that, the highlighted messages, the key takeaways, what would that be?
You were created for a reason. God created you for a reason. And it wasn't to be used and abused at all. You're loved. And there's a plan for you outside of this. And you can get through it. It's strong. It's hard. But you're absolutely loved. And you are worth more than what you're getting right now. I don't remember exactly what I said to you the first time we talked, but that was like, for sure, they are loved and God created them for a reason, and they deserve more.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And you actually made me think about a mantra that I developed over this last year, because I also am triggered by relationships of the past. And this year has been tenfold, better. But my mantra in those situations, because I would have anxiety attacks over them, right? And I took myself off of the Xanax slowly. I know there's an appropriate way to do that and a non-appropriate way, but I think about 4 or 5 years now, I got off of it completely. But then you have these mental gymnastics that you had to play with, and these attacks, and they were, triggers. And I developed a mantra of every negative thing that I was thinking about in those moments and saying to myself, I would develop a mantra to where it was the complete opposite. I'm a child of God. I am loved. I am beautiful, and I am worthy, something along those lines. And I would repeat that over and over and over in my head until you felt a little bit of a release, right? Because I couldn't breathe in my anxiety attacks. And so I'm like, it's okay. But that just, even your encouraging words to that goes hand in hand. And we are so mean to ourselves that if we just speak positively and remind ourselves that we are loved and that we do deserve better. And that doesn't mean you're entitled to, all these wonderful things. Like, it's going to be hard work to pull out of that. And there's going to be a lot of, that takes a lot of resilience to go through that healing process. And especially finding somebody, whether it be, your boyfriend or fiance or husband or a counselor, therapist, whatever the case, finding somebody to be able to talk to in those situations, and friends that are willing to go argue about a stop sign color. Katie, that's willing to have fake arguments with you. It's so important to be able to release that, but also have the conscious mind to move ahead of it too, and not let it take control forever.
And I want to just throw this out there. I should have done it earlier, but the hardest pill for me to swallow was accepting the fact that he probably didn't remember 90% of the things he did because he was so drunk all the time. So like alcohol, like getting alcohol out or limiting it significantly helped a lot.
Yeah.
Because you drink and then more of that stuff comes up. It's a downer. You don't need downers. You're already down enough. Don't go to alcohol. And one thing, actually, Josh started doing this, and he does it to our kids, and it's funny because we get such an eye roll. For every negative that they say, like, oh, my teacher was so crabby today. Okay, tell me 5 positive things about your day. It shifts your focus. And there's actual studies done about, okay, so you have 1 negative here, but it takes 5 positives to balance the 2 out. So negativity is very easy to get a hold of you. You have to fight for the joy and the happiness, and it's constant. You may have it one day, and the next day you may feel really low. And it's really important to have a support system in place. I know that there's my best friend. I can text her and I can say, come quiet, and she'll call me immediately. Not even kidding. But so we have 2 words. There's one word that it's like, okay, things hit the fan. I need you down here. And she's ready to jump on a plane. Yeah. There's another word that she knows, I just need to talk right now. And it goes both ways. And that type of support system is really good. Or I can text Josh and I can say, hey, I really need to talk to you tonight, or I need to talk to you on your way home, whatever it may be. And he's there. And I know there's days that he's like, if it's stuff from my past, he's just like he doesn't outwardly do it, but I'm pretty sure there's times inside that he's like, can we just be done with this shit already? But he doesn't, because he loves me and he understands that I need that support from him.
Yeah.
And that's the type of love you should have, instead of, oh my God, I'm not going to hear about this again. Yeah. You're going to have somebody that listens, whether they enjoy that subject or not, because there's a lot of subjects in a mature relationship that you don't enjoy talking about, but they need to be talked about.
Right. Absolutely. No, I think it is absolutely incredible to hear the story that you went through and how you've overcome, and just like the beauty that you are bringing to this world, Katie. Like, you really are bringing beauty to this world. Unfortunately, you had to go through something that wasn't so pleasant. But as we sit there, and I mean, even myself, I'm all like, gosh, it was a year and a half ago now. I'm all like, there's something inside of me that has been untapped. You know, like, there's more to what my purpose is than what I'm living now. What is that? I don't know. And this podcast was born, and, you know, I feel very called to do it. And I don't know what's going to happen from it, but I can only pray that it's also directed towards, you know, fulfilling my own purpose. And we just have to keep going and keep communicating with people and keep being willing to listen and keep being willing to help, keep being good people. But watching you and being able to sit here, go through that, overcome it, and then using it to help others. You're not sitting stagnant. And I think that is so honorable and just so inspirational. And I love that. And I can't wait to hear more about what's going to be happening and unfolding down there in Florida. So you'll have to keep us posted.
Maybe you just need to come visit.
Hey, I will. I will. No,
I some good beaches.
Yeah, I do get down to Florida quite a bit for like work, definitely a lot more in the past, but I foresee, you know, another Florida trip in my future before too long. But I just want everyone to hear that even though you've been through something really low and you have literally hit rock bottom, that you are destined for more and you are loved, and that you are going to be able to share your story with others and help them in the long run too. And so that's my encouragement for anyone, just stemming and pulling from Katie herself. But I know that there will be contact information below, and she's going to find me that list for the angel shots and get me those so we can put those below too. But just remember that it's not the end. It doesn't have to be, and you can come out on top. So if you have a story like Katie or any other story that you believe could be shared for the better of people out there in general, please get a hold of me. And like I said, we'll have Katie's information below. So thank you so much, Katie, for joining us. And we'll see you guys next time on Before You Know Me.